Hello, I'm Jacob and you're watching the Prepper's Bunker Outdoors. Today we're going to talk about how to use a ferro rod. We're going to start off with why you would want to choose a ferro rod, the different type of ferro rods that you can get, the different type of strikers that you can use, and then we'll finish up with kindling. So let's get right into it. Here are a couple of examples of ferro rods. And the reason that you want to pack and learn how to use a ferro rod is there are times where a lighter simply will not work, and friction fire, well, is always a difficult proposition, especially in less than ideal circumstances. A ferro rod will work if wet, frozen, cold. The only time these won't work is when you've used them all up. So, you know, a Bic lighter, when it gets wet, that's it. And you can't beat running out of fuel in your lighter in the bush, and it happens quicker than you would think when you're really struggling to get a fire going. Now let's talk about the type of ferro rod itself. There is some debate about the composition of ferro rods, mish metal and ferrocium and etc. I really don't think for practical reasons it matters. Basically, you have ferro rods with different types of handles or no handle, and different handles are practical for different reasons and different sizes. Let me just say as a general rule, especially if you're just starting off, a larger ferro rod with a larger handle is easier to use. This is probably the most common type of ferro rod here, manufactured by, who actually knows who manufactures these? I don't. Branded by a lot of different companies. I've never had an issue with them. The handles are good. I've had one, I think, that slipped out of the handle. No problem. They're affordable and they're very good to get started with, because chances are when you first start out using ferro rods, you're probably going to ruin a couple of them. This is the one that we'll be using today. This was given to me by the late Tracy Wilson from History Channel's Alone as a gift. I really like it, and the wood handle here is fat wood. We're going to talk about that later. Now, this actually isn't my favorite ferro rod. My favorite ferro rod is my Exotac ferro rod, because it has a capsule for keeping synthetic tinder in. And I love that thing, but I have misplaced it temporarily, so I don't have it out here with me. So, with that being said, let's get into the types of strikers. For strikers, there are some misconceptions with ferro rods. I've heard people say that you need a high carbon steel knife to actually strike a ferro rod. That is true of flint, but it is not true of ferro rods. Anything with a square edge will work with a ferro rod, even if it's a piece of glass, which we have some laying around here somewhere. Big piece of glass, a sharp rock. If it's got a square edge, you can find a way to make it work. This is your basic striker. And I recommend, no matter what knife that you carry, that if you've got a fire steel or a ferro rod, that you also have a striker. They can cost next to nothing. They basically weigh nothing, and it's always good to have backups. You also commonly see Sawzall blades used for this as strikers, and they're fantastic as well. Next up is a medium-sized knife. This is from Rewild Gear. It's a fantastic little knife, S35 VN, so you will see that it will strike the ferro rod even though it's stainless. And it has a ferro rod notch. This notch is very sharp. It's square on either side. It won't cut you, but it's very squared off. And what's nice about a ferro rod notch is the rest of the spine is rounded and more comfortable, and this is the only part that's square. Now, the downside to a notch is you don't get to choose where to strike your ferro rod. So if you like striking up here but your notch is down here, well, it's just too bad. You got to use what you got. Real quick, let me mention that there are people that talk about striking with the edge. in a last-ditch situation, you can do that. I have done that before, but I've heard people say it will not damage or dull your edge. They are liars who have never done it. I've used everything from the toughest, soft, high-carbon steels up to the newest super steels and anywhere in between, and if you use the edge, you will damage the edge. I don't recommend it. Next up, we've got this chonk. This is made by my buddy Paul Walker in Australia, forged up in Australia, and my camera apparently doesn't want to focus on it. But the spine is a 90-degree spine, and we can strike all the way up and down the length of this spine, and we will. I like a larger blade like this because of my favorite technique to use with a blade like this. You'll see that shortly. Alright, so one type of tinder that you can use here, and we're going to demonstrate the use of the striker, is natural. This is fat wood. Fat wood is just fantastic to use with ferro rods, and when you use it, when it's freshly grated like this using the striker, it actually off-gases some very flammable fumes, which, if you do it right away, you can get to take a fantastic spark. Humidity is going to affect this. Now, strikers are pretty straightforward. Some people have some tricks to them, but for the most part, you're going to run your striker down your ferro rod, and you can pull your ferro, or you can push your striker. Which you do really just depends on you and what you like to do. I'm doing a little bit of both here. What you're really looking for is to get a nice hot coal that just sits on what you're wanting to catch. And there we go. I'm kind of shocked that that took so long, to be honest. And that's no knife at all, just my ferro rod and my striker. Your next option may be even easier than fat wood, and that is synthetic kindling. This is actually one of my products, a Beach and Tactical Extreme Fire Kit Mini. And what we've got here is waxed jute twine, which is going to take very nicely. And of course, this is more difficult than it should be because I'm on film. I'll put a link up top to where you can purchase these. But with jute twine, or even with other types of synthetic fire starters, you usually want to fray them out as small as you can. You want really a big pile of really, really fine material, if you can get it, to catch your spark. Now, what I like to do, however, is I like to have a lot of this really fine stuff in a pile, but I like to have some of it a little bit thicker as well, so that the fine stuff will catch, and then it will burn the thicker stuff, and the thicker stuff will burn a little bit longer, because at the end of the day, remember, our goal is to start a fire with natural materials. So I've got some thicker stuff in here, and we're going to use our Rewild Gear Jasper 4 with the ferro rod notch to get her going. Man, does that thing throw some sparks. What a wonderful knife and a well-executed ferro rod notch. As you can tell, your synthetic kindling is just absolutely fantastic. Very easy to use. Now, the large knife, like this big old boy from Paul Walker in Australia, is my favorite striking tool because I can use the most controlled force and energy. And this tinder type is natural tinder. To get a fire going, I'd want more feather sticks than this. This is actually probably going to be a bit of a challenge because it's not very fine. and we are on damp ground, and I haven't put any effort into doing this right. But I'm hoping that I'm just going to use a lot of force, and this is going to work well, and you'll see how it works. But what I like to do with this is I like to put the knife either across my boot like this and pull the ferro rod across, or to put it across like this and pull the ferro rod across. And it allows me to have a whole lot of control and use a whole lot of force. Oh, there we go. Just brute force and a little bit of determination. Got this feather stick going, and if I was doing my part, we would have kept it going properly, but I was not doing my part or paying attention. And for the pictures and for the gram, let's see if we can get this lit again, so that I can get a proper thumbnail picture. Golly, this thing is just amazing. The just curls that we're pulling off of this thing. Look at that. Well, that wraps it up. I hope that you enjoyed the video. The ultimate point here is no matter what type of kindling you're using, what type of striker you're using, what type of ferro rod you're using, get out there and practice, guys. I can't tell you how important it is. You can't just go out and have your ferro rod and then when you really need it, try using it for the first time. This does take a bit of skill. As you can see in the film here, I won't edit it out. It didn't look beautiful when I did it. It took a couple strikes quite a few times depending on what I was doing, and there are things that I am less skilled at and more skilled at, and different techniques that I have used that are easier for me. The techniques that you use that might be easier for you could be completely different, and to find out, just gotta get out there and do it. I mentioned that my favorite ferro rod is an Exotech. The reason for that is the ferro rods are replaceable, and it has the waterproof capsule on top for artificial tinder. As you guys saw, artificial tinder is the easiest way to do this. So in a real life survival situation, if you're having a really hard time getting your fire going, trying to use natural kindling like you should be, and I should be saying tinder. If you're trying to use natural tinder like you should be, and you are putting too much effort into it, use that artificial stuff. Save it for when you really need it, but when you really need it, use it. Because you need to conserve your energy, and there's no reason to fight with it over pride. And guys, don't just take a ferro rod, all right? You should be using a ferro rod because your lighter stopped working. You know, go out there, practice with the ferro rod, but when you actually go out, bring a lighter, bring a ferro rod, bring artificial tinder, make real tinder while you're out there, have backups and backups and backups, waterproof matches, just do it all. Because fire is so important, especially in the winter, especially in the north. That's all I have for today. I hope that you enjoyed the video, and if you have any questions, let me know in the comments section below. I will put links to where you can find Rewild gear and Paul Walker in the description box below. And I hope that you have a blessed day.